Madison Carter walked into the courtroom like she was entering a fashion show. She wore a shiny red dress, high heels, and a diamond bracelet that sparkled under the lights. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her lips were painted bright pink. She didn't look worried, not even a little. Her friends whispered and giggled as they sat on the back bench. One of them said, "You'll be out in 10 minutes, Maddie." Madison smiled. Of course, Daddy's already paid the best lawyer. She looked around the courtroom. Everything looked old and boring to her. Brown wood walls, a big desk in the front, some people in suits, some people in uniforms. Then the courtroom door opened. Everyone stood up. Judge Raymond Rayford walked in, wearing his long black robe. He was tall, calm, and dark-skinned. His eyes were serious. He didn't smile. Madison looked at him and laughed out loud. She didn't even try to hide it. "Oh my God," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A black judge. Are we being serious right now?" Gasps filled the room. Even her lawyer turned to her in shock. Judge Rayford didn't move. He stood quietly behind his desk. He looked at Madison for a moment, deeply, as if he could see through her. Then he slowly sat down. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice clear and calm, "you may be seated." Madison rolled her eyes and sat down like she was bored already. She crossed her legs and whispered to her friend, "Let's get this over with. I have a spa appointment." The judge looked down at his papers. "Miss Carter is here for reckless driving, destruction of property, and disorderly conduct. Is that correct?" Her lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. But I'd like to remind the court, this is Madison's first official charge, and—" Judge Rayford raised his hand, and the lawyer stopped speaking. He turned to Madison. "Miss Carter, do you understand how serious these charges are?" Madison giggled again. "It's just a parking thing, right? Or maybe that tiny crash." No one was hurt. Silence again. Judge Rayford leaned forward. "You destroyed a community garden. You hit a parked car. You shouted at the police officer who tried to stop you. And you left the scene." Madison shrugged. "I didn't know you cared so much about plants." This time, even the clerk shook her head. Judge Rayford said nothing for a few seconds. The room was still. Everyone waited. Then he said one sentence, slow and quiet. "Miss Carter, you're not in your father's world anymore." Madison blinked. Her smile faded, just a little. The judge pressed a button. A screen behind him lit up. A short video played. It was security footage. Madison's red car was speeding. It ran over a fence. A small garden flew into the air. People screamed. A child jumped out of the way just in time. Madison turned red. "That angle is bad." The judge didn't reply. He pressed another button. The next clip showed her shouting at a police officer. "You don't touch me. Do you know who I am? My dad funds this city." Then she drove away. The screen went dark. Everyone looked at her. Judge Rayford spoke again, calm but powerful. "This courtroom does not care who your father is. What we care about is what kind of person you are." Madison didn't have a reply. Her friends at the back had stopped giggling. Even her lawyer was now sitting quietly. Then the judge said, "Court will take a recess. We will resume in 15 minutes. And Miss Carter, I suggest you take this time to think about what kind of girl you want to be." He stood up and left the room. As soon as he was gone, Madison turned to her lawyer. "What is happening right now? He's supposed to just find me and let me go." The lawyer whispered, "This isn't a joke, Madison. Judge Rayford is respected. He follows the law. He's not going to be bought." Madison stared at the door where the judge had walked out. For the first time that day, she didn't feel in control. She didn't feel powerful. And deep in her chest, she felt something new. Fear. Madison Carter sat quietly in the courtroom, her eyes staring at the floor. For the first time in her life, no one was laughing with her. Her friends had left. Even her lawyer now sat a little further from her. The air in the courtroom felt different when Judge Rayford returned. He didn't smile. He didn't look angry either. He looked serious, strong, like a man who had seen many people like Madison before, and wasn't surprised by her. He sat down, adjusted his robe, and said calmly, "Miss Carter, please stand." Madison stood, but she didn't have the same attitude as before. Her arms were no longer crossed. Her smile was gone. "I've read your file," Judge Rayford said, tapping the folder on his desk. "You've been caught shoplifting once, lying to school staff, and drinking underage. All the reports were dropped. Why?" Madison didn't answer. He continued, "Because your father paid for silence." Still, she said nothing. The judge leaned forward. "Do you think money can clean every mess you make?" "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she finally said. Her voice was soft now, almost like a child's. Judge Rayford nodded. "That's what everyone says. But you did hurt someone. The woman whose garden you destroyed. She's 78 years old. That was her only source of peace." Madison blinked. "It was just a garden." "Not to her," the judge said. "You also hit a parked car belonging to a single father who works 2 jobs. His car insurance doesn't cover what you did." She looked away. "And the child who almost got hit. His mother still hasn't stopped shaking." A pause. Heavy silence. Judge Rayford looked around the courtroom. Then he said something unexpected. "I will not send Miss Carter to jail." Everyone looked at him in shock, even Madison. Her lips curved up slightly. She was ready to smile again. But then the judge added, "Because jail would teach her nothing." The smile vanished. Instead, Judge Rayford said, "Miss Carter will be placed on community rehabilitation for 90 days. Madison frowned. "What does that mean?" "You'll be working in the very communities you disrespected," he said. "Every day. No makeup, no phone, no special treatment. And you will wear a vest that says 'I'm here to learn.'" Madison's jaw dropped. "That's humiliating." Judge Rayford nodded. "Yes, and that's the point." Her lawyer stood, ready to argue. But the judge raised his hand. "I'm not done," he said. Then he turned back to Madison. "You will also meet with the people you hurt, face to face. You will apologize to them. You will listen to their stories. You will see the world that doesn't come with private jets and country clubs." Madison shook her head. "You can't do this to me." "I can," the judge replied. "And I am." Madison's voice broke. "But I don't know how to do any of that." Judge Rayford looked her in the eyes and said something that hit her hard. "That's because no one ever made you learn. Until now." That afternoon, Madison was taken to a small neighborhood across the city. Gone were the rich buildings and shiny streets she was used to. Here, the walls had peeling paint. Kids played with old soccer balls in the dirt. People looked tired, but alive. She was taken to an old woman's house, a woman with white hair and a wrinkled face. Her hands were worn, strong, and full of story. "This is Mrs. Irene," said the social worker. "You destroyed her garden." Madison looked at the tiny woman who stared at her with tired but wise eyes. Mrs. Irene said softly, "That garden was my late husband's gift to me. He built it before he passed. Every flower had a story. And you ran over it like it was trash." Madison opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. Mrs. Irene didn't smile. She just said, "Then start learning." And she handed Madison a shovel. "Let's begin." Back in the judge's chambers, Judge Rayford sat alone. He looked out the window, deep in thought. One of his assistants came in. "Sir, are you sure about this? People are talking." "I know," he said, "but she needs more than jail. She needs truth, and truth comes through experience." He looked down at a photo on his desk, a picture of a younger him, dressed in a cheap suit, standing outside a courtroom that once told him he didn't belong. "She reminds me of someone I once judged too fast," he said quietly. Back at the garden, Madison dug into the soil. Her hands were dirty. Her knees hurt. Her back ached. But for the first time in her life, she was silent, listening, learning. Madison didn't like it. Not at all. Her fingers were sore from digging in the dirt. She had never worked this hard in her life. She had always been pampered, always had someone do things for her. Never had she been made to do the work herself, and never had she been forced to face the consequences of her actions. But as the sun began to set, she couldn't help but feel a tiny shift inside her. The air felt different now, cooler, softer. Her hands, covered in dirt, reminded her of something real, something her life had never given her: responsibility. "You're doing great," Mrs. Iron said quietly, watching Madison work. She wasn't smiling, but her tone was soft and calm. Madison, feeling both embarrassed and proud, stopped for a moment. She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. I didn't know it would be like this. I didn't know it was this important." Mrs. Irene nodded. "It's not about just a garden, dear. It's about respect. It's about understanding how something simple, something you thought was small, can mean the world to someone." Madison looked at the ground beneath her. She could barely imagine the pain Mrs. Irene must have felt when her garden was destroyed, but she felt something stir in her chest, a small understanding, a small piece of what it meant to care about something more than herself. After a long pause, Madison picked up her shovel again. This time, she worked more carefully, more deliberately. She focused on each motion, the way the dirt fell, the way it smelled. It was harder than she expected, but she didn't complain. Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Judge Rayford sat in his chambers, reviewing a stack of files. He knew Madison would have to face more challenges, more uncomfortable truths about herself. He couldn't help but wonder if she would change, or if she would break under the weight of her own arrogance. But he didn't doubt the process. It wasn't easy to learn humility. It wasn't easy to look at the consequences of your actions and understand them fully. He had hoped this experience would push her, but would it be enough? The following week was a blur for Madison. Every day, she was out in the community, helping in different places. She cleaned up trash in the streets, painted fences, worked in soup kitchens, and helped rebuild homes. At first, she couldn't stand it. She complained every chance she got. But slowly, something inside her started to change. She began to see the value in helping others. She started to understand the importance of giving back. One afternoon, after a long day of volunteering at a local shelter, Madison sat down on the steps of the building, exhausted. Her clothes were dirty, and her hair was a mess. But for once, she didn't care. She was just tired. A young woman came and sat beside her. She looked to be about the same age as Madison, with dark skin and a tired smile. "You look like you've been through a lot," the girl said softly. Madison smiled weakly. "Yeah, it's been tough. I never thought I'd be doing something like this." The girl nodded. "It's not easy, but it's worth it. You know, we're all trying to make it. People like us, we have to work twice as hard to get half as far." Madison stared at the ground. "I've always had everything handed to me. I've never worked for anything. And now, I feel like I don't even know who I am." The girl smiled gently. "You're learning. That's the most important part. You've got a chance to change, to make it right. Don't waste it." Madison didn't respond. She just stared ahead, her thoughts swirling. Back at the courthouse, Judge Rayford received a report about Madison's progress. The volunteers she had worked with spoke highly of her, saying that she had begun to show genuine effort, and even though she wasn't always perfect, she was trying. The judge wasn't surprised. He had seen this kind of change before, but he also knew there was a long way to go. Madison hadn't fully understood the weight of her actions yet. The lessons she was learning now were just the beginning. The next day, Madison was assigned a new task. She was sent to help a man named Mr. Parker, who lived alone in a small house. He was an elderly man who had recently suffered a stroke, and his house had fallen into disrepair. When Madison arrived, she was told to help him clean up the yard and fix some broken furniture. Mr. Parker greeted her with a smile, though it was clear that he had trouble moving. As they worked together, Madison couldn't help but notice how hard Mr. Parker was trying. Even though he had limited strength, he still managed to help her move some small things around. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for special treatment. As they sat together for a break, Madison couldn't hold back her questions. "Why do you do this? Why not just ask for help from someone else?" Mr. Parker looked at her with kind eyes. "Because, dear, sometimes you don't need help. Sometimes all you need is the strength to do what you can, even if it's just a little. And sometimes, when you're helping others, you find a strength you never knew you had." Madison didn't know how to respond, but she understood the message. She could feel it deep in her heart. The strength wasn't in the act itself. It was in the willingness to help, to give, even when you didn't have to. That night, as she sat in her small apartment, Madison reflected on everything she had been through. The lessons, the pain, the work. It had been hard. But maybe that was the point. Change wasn't easy, but it was worth it. She closed her eyes, thinking about the journey ahead. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that courtroom. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand what it meant to be truly sorry. The days felt longer now for Madison. She had been working hard, helping others, learning the lessons that life was forcing upon her. Every day she learned more, but it wasn't enough. There was a part of her that still didn't feel completely changed. She still had doubts. The memory of her arrogance, the way she had mocked others before, seemed to echo in her mind every time she looked at the people around her. But now, she was facing her biggest challenge yet. It was a week before her court appearance, and Madison knew this was her chance. This was the moment that could define who she would become. The final test of her character. She had learned that actions speak louder than words, but now she needed to show everyone, not just the judge, not just the people who had doubted her, but also herself, that she had truly changed. Madison had spent the last few days helping at a homeless shelter, working side by side with people who had lost everything. She had listened to their stories, shared meals with them, and even slept on the floor with them. It was humbling, but it was also a reminder that life was fragile, that what she had once taken for granted was something that many people struggled to hold on to. Now she stood outside the courthouse, staring at the building that had once symbolized power and privilege to her, the power she thought she deserved, the privilege she believed was her right. But now it felt different. The courthouse no longer seemed like a place to hide behind her wealth and status. Now it felt like a place of accountability. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked inside, her steps echoing in the empty hallway. The familiar faces of the lawyers, the judges, and the court officers seemed less intimidating now. They didn't hold power over her anymore. She had learned what it meant to be humble, what it meant to admit when you were wrong. She had learned that true strength wasn't in belittling others or using your privilege to get ahead. It was in lifting people up and admitting your mistakes. Judge Rayford was already seated at the bench when she entered the courtroom. His gaze was steady, not unkind, but serious. He had been watching her closely. He had seen the growth, but he wasn't going to make it easy for her. Not yet. Madison Carter, Judge Rayford's voice was firm but calm. You've been given a chance. You've worked hard to demonstrate that you've changed. But now, it's time for you to show us if that change is real. Not just through actions, but through words. Tell us, what have you learned? Madison stood at the witness stand, her heart racing. The room was silent. Every eye was on her, waiting. She could feel the weight of their gazes, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't embarrassed. She was ready. Taking a deep breath, she spoke. I've learned that I was wrong. I've learned that power doesn't come from how much money you have or who you know. It doesn't come from looking down on others or thinking that you're better than anyone. I've learned that the real power is in humility. It's in listening to others, learning from them, and showing kindness. And I've learned that mistakes are a part of life, but it's how you learn from them that defines who you are. Madison paused, her throat tight. I used to think that I was above everyone else. But now, I see that no one is above anyone. We all have something to offer, and we all deserve respect. Judge Rayford's eyes softened slightly, but he didn't show any outward sign of approval. He needed to see if her words were truly backed by change. He nodded slowly. Your words are powerful, Madison, but words alone are not enough. You must prove that this change is real. You must show the world that you are someone who can be trusted, someone who has learned what it means to be accountable. Madison nodded. She understood. She had been given a second chance, but that didn't mean she could simply walk away without proving herself. She needed to continue this journey, to keep showing the world that she had learned her lessons. The courtroom went silent as Madison took a step back. Her heart was still racing, but now there was a sense of calm in her. She had spoken the truth, and she knew that no matter the outcome, she had changed. As the judge prepared to deliver his final verdict, Madison waited. She wasn't nervous anymore. She knew that her real punishment wasn't what would come from the court. It was the journey she had been on, the work she had done, the growth she had experienced. That was her true punishment, and it had already begun to shape her into a better person. Judge Rayford raised his hand, signaling for silence in the courtroom. He looked at Madison for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Madison Carter, he began, his voice steady. You have shown significant growth. Your actions, your words, and your willingness to take responsibility for your past actions have not gone unnoticed. But make no mistake, this journey is far from over. It is not enough to change for a day, for a week, or even for a month. It is a lifelong commitment. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. But because you have shown genuine effort and growth, I am willing to offer you a second chance. A chance to continue your journey, not just for yourself, but for others. The room was silent. Madison's heart fluttered in her chest. A second chance. It was everything she had hoped for. But more importantly, it was a chance to prove to herself that she could truly change. As she left the courtroom that day, Madison felt a sense of peace she had never known. She wasn't the same person who had walked in a few months ago. She wasn't perfect, and she knew she never would be. But she had learned one of life's greatest lessons. Change isn't just something you say. It's something you do. And as long as she kept doing the work, she would keep growing. And maybe, just maybe, she could help others find the strength to change too. Madison walked out of the courthouse feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The heavy burden of guilt she had carried for so long seemed to fade as she took each step. But with that relief came something else. Uncertainty. She had been given a second chance, but would she truly be able to live up to it? She had learned so much in the past few months. But now, she understood more than ever that real change wasn't just about saying the right words or making grand gestures. It was about the small, everyday actions. The decisions that showed whether she had really learned from her mistakes. The city streets were bustling with life, but for Madison, everything felt different. As she passed by people on the sidewalk, she found herself looking at them differently, seeing their struggles, their stories. Where once she had walked past them without a second thought, now she wondered what they might be going through, and how she could help. Madison knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Her past actions couldn't be erased. There would always be people who would see her as the spoiled rich girl, the one who had mocked others, the one who thought she could get away with anything. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was how she faced the future. She had promised to continue working on herself, and she intended to keep that promise. She wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but she knew that whatever happened, she would face it with a new perspective. That evening, Madison sat in her apartment, the soft glow of the city lights streaming through the window. She wasn't thinking about herself anymore. She was thinking about what she could do for others. There were countless ways she could make a difference: volunteering at shelters, using her privilege to help those who didn't have the same opportunities, and most importantly, listening to people, really listening. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. Madison looked at the screen. It was her lawyer. She answered quickly, her heart racing with anticipation. "Madison," her lawyer began, his voice calm but serious. "I have an update for you. The judge has reviewed your case, and the sentence has been decided." Madison's heart skipped a beat. "What's the verdict?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The judge has agreed to reduce your sentence," the lawyer explained. "But there's one more condition. You will need to continue your community service for the next year. And you will have to work with troubled youth, helping them turn their lives around, just as you've begun to do with your own." Madison's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the end of her sentence she had hoped for, but it was a chance to keep proving herself. A chance to continue learning, growing, and most importantly, helping others. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in her life, Madison felt ready for it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I won't let you down." After hanging up, Madison sat back and let the silence fill the room. She had a long way to go, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the journey. She was no longer running away from her mistakes, from her past. She was walking forward, one step at a time. Her thoughts drifted back to the courtroom, to the way Judge Rayford had looked at her when he delivered his final verdict. His eyes had softened, but there was something in his gaze that told her this was just the beginning. She had passed his test, but now the real test began. The people she had once looked down upon, the ones she had thought of as lesser, they were the ones who would help shape her future. Their stories, their struggles would become a part of her own. And through it all, she would learn what it truly meant to be humble, to be kind, and to use her privilege for good. The sound of footsteps echoed outside her door, followed by a knock. Madison stood up, walking slowly to the door. She opened it to find a delivery man holding a small package in his hand. "Delivery for Madison Carter," he said, handing it over to her. Curious, she took the package and closed the door. It was small, unmarked, with no return address. She opened it slowly, revealing a simple envelope inside. She pulled the envelope out and opened it carefully. Inside, there was a note, written in elegant handwriting. "For every new beginning, there's a road you must travel to prove your worth. Keep moving forward, Madison. Don't forget where you came from." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest. This note was a reminder that her journey wasn't over. She still had so much more to prove, not just to others, but to herself. She set the note down, taking a deep breath. Madison knew that she would never be the same person again, but she also knew that her past would never be something she could fully escape from. It would always be a part of her, but it didn't have to define her. She would keep moving forward. The phone rang again, and Madison picked it up, her heart racing. "Hello, Madison." It was Judge Rayford's voice on the other end. "I've been following your progress. I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of the work you're doing. You've come a long way." Madison smiled, the weight in her chest lightening just a little. "Thank you, Your Honor. Don't forget, though," he added, "the real work is only just beginning." Madison nodded to herself, knowing that his words were true. She wasn't finished yet. She had a long road ahead of her, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had finally found her path.